Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on new grants to support Breakfast After the Bell. Thank you very much for joining us today. I know everyone has incredibly busy schedules, and we appreciate you taking the time out of your day to learn more about the resources that are available to support school breakfast. My name is Tia Shimada. I'm the Director of Programs for California Food Policy Advocates, and we're very happy to be hosting this webinar, and we are even happier to have two great panelists on the line with us today. The first is Tara Chambers. She is a School Nutrition Program Specialist with the Nutrition Services Division at CDE, and Tara is in charge of staffing the school breakfast grant process for the Department of Education. So she is a fantastic resource and has all the details you could want about the grant process. We also have on the line with us Stephanie Bruce. She is the Director of Nutrition Services for Palm Springs Unified School District. And Stephanie has on-the-ground expertise in how to make after-the-bell breakfast work, how to make the programs a success for students and for schools and for your district. So really glad that we get to tap into her expertise today as well. Just to give you a sense of where we're going to head in the next hour or so, we're going to start off by just doing a quick rundown of webinar logistics. Then you will hear a brief introduction to Breakfast After the Bell, as well as the breakfast grants. Tara will take us into more of the grant details, including some tips about successful applications and making sure that you have all the key dates in mind for the grant process. And then we'll turn things over to Stephanie, who will give you some really great insights into how to operate Breakfast After the Bell. And we'll wrap up today with a Q&A session. If you are joining us and you also joined us for the webinar in January, I just wanted to point out two things that you might expect to be different today. The first is that Tara is going to be able to share some frequently asked questions and answers from folks that she's already gotten who are interested in applying for the grants. So this is a chance to hear what some of your colleagues and peers have been asking Tara about the grant process. And then Stephanie is also going to be sharing some additional details today about the Breakfast After the Bell programs that operate in her high schools. If you joined us for the last session, you know that she gave a great presentation last time, largely focused on classroom breakfast. So today she's also going to spend some time talking about the programs in her secondary schools. And then, of course, you have a chance, if you joined us last time, to ask any questions and have them answered in regards to things that have arisen since the last time we met. So if you have started the grant application process or you're now looking at the grant application and ready to dive in and any questions have arisen, this is a great opportunity for you to get those questions answered. A couple of notes about webinar logistics, just in case you're wondering. Everyone who is in our audience today is on mute, and we'll keep you muted. That doesn't mean we don't want to hear from you. Please do submit your questions. You can do that in the control panel in the question box. Type in a question. We have somebody monitoring that question box to make sure they get answered. And if we aren't able to answer all the questions in real time today, we will follow up with answers and make sure that the entire group that's in the audience today gets to hear those answers. So we'll be sending those out by email. We are recording the session and the slides will be posted. So if there's something you missed or if you're madly trying to take notes, rest assured you'll be able to find the information online after today, probably posted by early next week. I wanted to take just a minute or two to give some background about CFPA so that you understand why we're so excited about hosting these webinars and why we're so excited about the resources that are available to support school breakfast. We're a nonprofit policy advocacy organization that works to make sure that low-income folks across California have access to nutritious, affordable food. And we've worked for decades to try and increase the reach of the school breakfast program. We're particularly drawn to this work on breakfast because of the great need among California kids. If you look at the population that's served by public schools in California, about 3 in 5 kids in our public schools, or more than 3 million students total, are eligible for free or reduced price school meals. And we know that that's the population of children who are at higher risk for hunger, for poor health, and for poor academic outcomes. We also know in California that there is a school breakfast gap. It's a solvable gap, but it's a gap nonetheless, and it's persisted for many years. On an average school day, about 2 million of our most vulnerable public school students miss out on the health and academic benefits of school breakfast. And I know that I'm not telling you anything you don't know when we point out the benefits of kids getting connected to school breakfast. There are benefits when it comes to cognitive function, academic achievement, attendance, as well as physical and emotional social health. And we also see improved classroom behavior, decreased delinquency, improved tardiness. So by many measures, connecting kids to school breakfast can benefit both students and schools overall. And as I said, we have a school breakfast gap in California, but it is a solvable gap. And one of the things that we have seen in pioneering districts in our state and across the country is that if you change when breakfast is offered, you increase access to that incredibly important resource. You increase access to those critical meals, and you see kids reap the benefits. So there are a number of different ways that breakfast can be offered after the bell or after the school day has begun. I'm going to give just a very quick overview here of some of the major service models that can be used, but I hope folks keep in mind that these models can all be tailored to meet the specific needs of your students and of your schools. So nothing that I'm saying here is set in stone, and certainly you'll hear more from Stephanie about how she has made these programs work in her district. And before I describe the different models, I do want to point out these are all allowable service options that can be operated under the guise of the federal school breakfast program. So perhaps you're a district that already operates the federal school breakfast program. These service models are ways to tweak that program to better reach the students in need in your district. So one of the really popular after the bell breakfast models is second chance breakfast. And what we mean by second chance breakfast is simply serving students sometime during the mid-morning after the school day has begun. So for example, if you were a secondary school, this might happen during a passing period. If you're an elementary school, this might happen during recess. It is making sure that breakfast is offered sometime after the start of the school day and isn't just confined to early in the morning before school starts. There's another concept called grab-and-go breakfast. This is a method in which breakfast is usually set up in high-traffic areas, often on mobile carts. It is meals that are very portable, quick and easy to grab. Kids are able to take a meal on their way to class, on their way to recess, and it is both speedy, so it's very time efficient, but also make sure that you bring breakfast to where kids are and don't necessarily require kids to come to the cafeteria if that's not something that fits into their schedule. So grab-and-go breakfast is another great option. And then another thing that we see schools do is breakfast in the classroom. This typically happens in elementary schools, though that doesn't rule it out for higher grade levels. And breakfast in the classroom is when the breakfast meal is served in the first 10 to 15 minutes of class. Students eat their meal in the classroom, clean up their meal, and get their day started. So often the meal is paired with things like taking attendance, doing a homework check, some silent reading time. Teachers find a lot of creative ways to pair the meal service with actual academic and administrative activities. And again, these are all some basic concepts of when and where breakfast can be served, but all of these models can be tailored to meet the specific criteria of your students and schools. So now on to the resources part of this webinar. The state legislature of California has actually in the past recognized the great value of a school breakfast, and we've seen this recognition in budget investments by the state. So there is a long-standing pool of about $1 million that has been made available by the state legislature to support the startup and expansion of school breakfast. And this resource has been available for several years and has helped launch and expand breakfast in many schools across the state. One of the things that our organization wanted to do was to increase resources that were available specifically for after the bell breakfast. And so last year, California Food Policy Advocates led a state budget request to increase the budget investment in school breakfast grants, and we were very happy when that resulted in $2 million in additional grant funds from the state. These funds are prioritizing after the bell breakfast in high poverty schools. And like the existing grant funds, they cover one-time costs, so equipment, promotional materials, training, etc. Tara's going to really dive into the details of these grants, but I wanted to just make sure that we did a quick overview so that so folks understand there is the $1 million that has been available for many years and is still available now, and then this additional $2 million that is going to be prioritized for after the bell in high poverty schools. And though we still think the state legislature has some room to improve in supporting school nutrition programs, I think this budget investment is a good sign that they recognize how critical these resources are to our students. And before I turn things over to Tara, I just wanted to let folks know about some other resources that are available. California Food Policy Advocates, we've put together a number of school breakfast materials, everything from research supporting the importance of school breakfast to outlines of how after the bell breakfast models work, and you can access all of those things from our website, which is linked here. We've also recently launched a host of materials looking at the connections between the local control funding formula, LCAPs, and school nutrition. And these materials might be a great way for you all to engage staff and administrators that are outside of food and nutrition services. So certainly the folks within our food and nutrition world understand the importance of school meals, but that's not necessarily the case with all administrators within a district. So in order to better speak their language, it may help to have some of these materials that connect the lifeblood of education funding, LCFF, with school nutrition. So if those might be useful to you, I encourage you to take a look. And then finally, in addition to the state-funded breakfast grants, there are other grant funds available, and one of those comes from California Action for Healthy Kids. There are a number of other private grant sources, but did want to flag that California Action for Healthy Kids is starting another round of grants. These grants can be used to complement a state-funded grant, and I've put down contact information for their lead on their school meal grants, and I encourage you to reach out if you think that you might want to access those resources in addition to the state-funded grants. Okay, and with that, I'm going to ask Tara to kick off her portion of the panel and to get us deeper into the grant process and everything that you might need to know about how to put together a successful grant application. Tara?
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, TIA and CFPA, for hosting this webinar. My name is Tara Chambers. I'm a school nutrition program specialist, and I administer these grants. I wanted to start out by addressing some frequently asked questions that I've received lately. And one of the #1 questions is basically, are we eligible for the grant? So public school districts, county offices of education, and directly funded charter schools are eligible for the grant. Sites have to have at least 20% of students enrolled approved for free or reduced price meals. And the additional pot of funding that TIA was just referring to will be prioritized for sites with over 60% free and reduced price meals and are implementing or expanding a breakfast after the bell service model. And each SFA may apply for no more than 10 sites for up to $15,000 per site. So those are the eligibility requirements for the grant. Moving on, another question I get frequently is basically, when are the grants due? What's the timeline? So I wanted to go over that really quickly. March 1st is the deadline for grant applications. In June 2017, we will select the grantees, and in July, grantees will receive that funding. The grant period runs from July 1, 2017 through March 1, 2018. One note I want to make is don't jump the gun, and if you receive a grant, make sure that you're purchasing equipment within that grant period. So don't start in June, make sure you wait until July 1. We have progress reports. Those are due in November of 2017, and again, final invoices are due March 1st, 2018. Another frequently asked question, well, for example, we are opening a new site in school year 2017-18. Since we do not have free and reduced price meal data for this site, can we still apply for a grant? So if you have a new site and you don't have eligibility information available for us, remember that you have to have at least 20% eligible to be eligible for the grant. We can work with you basically. So in the spaces that require free and reduced price meal data, write in new site. That way we know it's a new site and you don't have data available yet. If your agency scores high enough to receive a grant, we will withhold the payment until your agency establishes eligibility for the site and we ensure that the site has at least 20% of students eligible for free or reduced price meals. So this might be a little more complicated, but we still encourage new sites to apply for the grant and we'll work with you to make sure that that can happen. Another question we get: we do not participate in any of the child nutrition programs. Can we still apply for a grant? The short answer is no. In order to receive grant funding, your site must participate in the school breakfast program. If you're interested in applying for the school breakfast program, contact me and we can work through that. So you can apply for a grant if you're not on the school breakfast program yet, but we need to make sure that you've been approved for the breakfast program before we release the funding for the grant. So again, it might be a little more complicated, but we can work with you and we do encourage you to apply for the grant. All right, this next question is fairly common. We have excess net cash resources. Can we still apply for a grant? So one of the conditions of the grant is that SFAs do not have excess net cash resources, but we still might be able to work with you on that. So we evaluate this on a case-by-case basis. So if you have a little bit of excess net cash resources, we still encourage you to apply for the grant. And then we'll work out if it's too much in excess or maybe there's a legitimate reason you have excess net cash resources. Again, we'll work that out on a case-by-case basis. Another question we get: is there a separate application for the Breakfast After the Bell grant? And the answer to that is no. We try to keep the grant application simple. So if you're applying for the traditional school breakfast program grant, it's going to be the same application as the Breakfast After the Bell grant. So same application. We tried to keep that simple for you all. All right, where can I download the application? So I provided a link here, and I wanted to highlight a couple things, just sort of a reminder. The application is in two parts. So there's the application section 1 grant plan, and you'll complete one of those per SFA. So that's going to be SFA level information. And then you're going to also submit a site application for each site. So if you have 10 sites, then you're going to complete 1 grant plan and 10 site applications. And the deadline, again, just so no one forgets, March 1st, 2017. And note that the CDE doesn't accept any electronic applications. So email is not going to work. You want to mail that in to us. And we don't accept faxed submissions either, or any placeholder applications. And make sure that the grant application is complete. So again, it's you're going to submit those 2 documents, the grant plan and the site applications. And now moving into sort of the details of the grant application. Once you begin the grant plan, you're going to be asked if you have any public or private assistance. So additional points are awarded if the SFA has support from the community and if you have gone above and beyond to get your community involved in your school breakfast program. That shows that you have a lot of investment in your program and it's supported by public or private entities. An example of such assistance would be maybe your school received a mini grant from a private business or some sort of assistance from a local food bank. And then we also want to know, and this next one is really important to us, we want to know if the food service department has the support of the SFA. Is your administration on board with your plans? How are they supporting your efforts to implement or expand the school breakfast program? So if we know that your district is on board and supports your plans, that's a good sign that your program is going to be successful and it's worth the investment. But if you don't have anything for this section, again, we encourage you to apply. It's worth up to 5 points each, so it's not going to break your score if you don't have that kind of commitment. Moving on to barriers, so here you'll provide a detailed explanation that describes the existing barriers that hinder the SFA's ability to provide breakfast or decrease children's ability or desire to participate in breakfast. And this is up to 5 points. So some examples, some common things that I've seen of barriers, late buses, or the students aren't hungry first thing in the morning, or students would rather play than wait in line. So those are some common barriers, and the goal is to overcome those barriers with the breakfast grant funding. So that's the grant plan. Moving on to the site application. This is where a lot of the points are, the innovative strategy. So this is up to 30 points. And here you'll identify innovative strategies designed to maximize participation. And so we see really any of those breakfast after the bell service models as innovative. So breakfast in the classroom, second chance breakfast, we consider those to be innovative strategies. But you don't want to just write in, we want to do second chance breakfast in your application. We want to see the detail. So here you're going to want to provide detailed explanation of how this strategy is going to help you to overcome those barriers. And moving on to the budgets, there's a section for equipment, outreach, and promotion and training in the budget portion of the application. So for equipment, be specific and reflect quantities for each item listed. In addition to kitchen equipment, most of our grantees are funded for carts used during second chance breakfast and wireless POS systems. Those are just some of the things that I see frequently on these grant applications. Outreach expenses, banners, posters, flyers, anything to promote the breakfast program is usually what I see here. Make sure that you are keeping in mind allowable and unallowable costs, and those are available in our RFA. And if you have any questions about what's allowable, what's not allowable, go ahead and contact me, and I'll have my contact information later in the presentation. And then finally, training costs. So here you'll want to limit training costs to expenses that vendors charge to train on the use of their equipment, such as a point-of-sale system. Here we cannot approve staff salaries, so keep that in mind when you're applying. And finally, this next section, basically, if you have it, you get the points, and if you don't, you don't. So if you're implementing a new school breakfast program, we award 15 points because we understand that it's a little more challenging to start up a school breakfast program than it might be to expand it. If your site qualifies for severe need breakfast reimbursement, which means that the site served 40% or more free and reduced price lunches 2 years prior, you'll be awarded 15 points. And if it's a program improvement school with at least 50% or more enrolled students approved for free or reduced price meals, that's an extra 5 points. And if you're not sure if your school is a program improvement school, you can contact me. That information is also available on the CDE's website. And finally, if you agree to operate the school breakfast program for no less than 3 years, you'll get an extra 5 points. So moving on to some tips for submitting a successful grant application. Make sure that you are reading the entire breakfast grant RFA, which includes the management bulletin, the instructions, and the scoring criteria and matrix. It's a lot to read, but there's some good information in there. So take some time to look at that and let me know if you have any questions. Also, another tip the equipment that you request should support your barriers and innovative ideas. So sometimes I have a hard time connecting what the barriers are and the equipment. I have a hard time seeing how those connect. So let's say you write a compelling narrative for the need to implement second chance breakfast out on the playground during recess in the innovative ideas section. But then you request an oven to replace an old one in the equipment section. If you just do that, you'll probably score lower because the equipment should connect with the innovative ideas. So just based on that, it doesn't seem like having a second chance breakfast and an oven really connect. But they could. For example, if you argue that second chance breakfast will increase participation and makes it necessary for the SFA to purchase a new oven to keep up with the new demand, that makes sense. That connects well. So just make sure that you're connecting the dots so that the reviewer can see that. And again, take the time to get at least one quote, but ideally 3 quotes for the equipment. You want to have a realistic idea of how much the equipment's going to cost. So let's say you're awarded $10,000 for an oven that ends up costing $13,000. We won't be able to cover that extra $3,000. So if you got the quote beforehand, then you could request $13,000 and the whole oven would be paid for. So just keep that in mind when you're applying for the grant. And I already touched on this, but again, be descriptive in the narrative section. So you really want to paint a picture for the reviewer. If you want to implement second chance breakfast on the playground and you need grant money for a cart, then you really want to explain where you're going to put the cart, why you're going to put the cart there, how you're going to ensure that meals are counted and claimed correctly, any little minor details, just so that the scorer has a good understanding of what you plan to do and see that it will be a successful plan. And also we have several SFAs that have to return grant funding because after the award was granted, it became clear that the administration at the SFA was not on board with the food service director's plan. So make sure that when you're applying for the grant, you're working with all possible parties to ensure your grant plans can be carried out successfully. And if you have any questions, please contact me. I have my email address here and phone number. I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
All right, Tara, thank you so much. And I will, from personal experience, just say how responsive Tara is. I know she's really eager to see lots of schools, lots of districts successfully apply for these grants. So really, if you do have questions, I encourage you to reach out to her. She is as responsive as she can be and can be a really useful resource as you're moving through this process. Before I turn things over to Stephanie Bruce from Palm Springs, I did want to just put another plug in there for your questions. If you have any question, big or small, this is a great time for you to ask it. We will carve out about 10 minutes at the end of the session to address any questions that come in, any tech questions that come in through the question box. So don't be shy if you have a question. Now is a great time to get it answered. And with that, I will say, Stephanie, if you are on the line and can take it from here.
I am. Thank you so much, Tia. So just to tell everyone a little bit about my district, we have about 22,000 students. We're K-12. We have 27 school sites across 5 cities, and we are a high-need district. We are 84% free or reduced. We serve over 4 million meals annually, and our breakfast participation is less than half of the total meals we serve. It's about 1.3 million breakfasts annually. We do offer universal free breakfast and have done so for over 7 years now. And we started with 9 breakfast in the classroom programs about 6 years ago, and we currently have 5 of those programs still running today. We did have one of our middle schools last year try to end the program. They thought it was just too difficult and it really wasn't doing a great benefit to the students. And within a month, the principal called and said that they wanted the program back because the teachers noticed that the students were hungry, they were a little more lethargic, some were falling asleep in class, and the absenteeism went up. So that was when we got to SAVE, which was wonderful for us. We do offer 3 different breakfast after the bell programs. We have 4 breakfast in the classroom programs. We have them at 2 of our elementary sites and 2 of our middle school sites, and all 4 of those sites are our highest need sites in the district. They're above 90%. We do a second chance breakfast in one of our high schools, and students swipe their card, they grab a pre-packed breakfast, and it all happens in just a few seconds during passing period. We used to have a second chance breakfast time period where we had a 15-minute passing period, but with union issues and instructional minute needs, that was taken away. But we continue the program and still offer that second chance to our students. Our charter school offers what we call an extended breakfast. The site is 72% free and reduced. They were doing a breakfast in the classroom, but some of the teachers were struggling with how to properly manage the program and really felt just a little overwhelmed. It was too much for them to handle. So during a brainstorming meeting with the staff, someone suggested that students eat breakfast after their morning exercise. In this school, each classroom is required to have a daily structured physical activity. And at the end of that physical activity, the class enters our multipurpose room and goes through the breakfast line and then sits down at the classroom and has breakfast before returning to class. Some days we actually serve more breakfasts than lunches at this site, and we're now in our 3rd year and we're still going strong. And the charter school was the only school in our district that showed marked improvement on the state assessment standards. So where do you start when you want to start a breakfast after the bell program? You really want to determine whether or not the program is going to be feasible, because even the breakfast grants are so helpful in getting them started with the one-time startup costs. You still need to make sure that managing that program going forward is going to be cost effective. So you want to look at how many students you have on campus before school, and how many of those students are arriving by bus. Are the majority arriving by bus? What time are those buses arriving at the school site? So you want to make sure the students have enough time to get to class and get breakfast. You want to know who's going to provide supervision. Are you going to have to provide and pay for that, or will site administration be supportive and provide some supervision and pay for that expense? And staffing, do you have the staffing to cover that program? That can also be a costly endeavor when doing any kind of breakfast program. You also want to determine whether or not your kitchen can handle it. So you want to do a site survey, take a look at your equipment, take a look at your space, make sure you have enough power, because if you're going to need additional refrigeration, you want to make sure that that school site can handle the additional power load. And then, does anyone want the program? And Tara mentioned earlier about some districts having to pay back the money because they didn't have support from the site administration or the school administration. It's so important to get that support, otherwise the program won't be able to continue, and you don't want to be giving this money back. So you want to attend principal meetings, talk to them, try and find an advocate, ask to be placed on site meeting agendas, go talk to the teachers, see if any of them are interested. And if you do annual updates to your board, talk to your school board about the importance of breakfast and where there's some opportunity to be serving some after the bell programs. So some keys to success, or what I like to call how to struggle less, is it's really important to be prepared when you're starting an after the bell program, because you are encroaching on that teacher time. And the majority of your teachers you'll find are supportive of the program, but it's going to be that handful of teachers that are just adamant against it that will be your most difficult hurdle to get over. And the best way to do that is just by being prepared. These programs are so important to our students, their development, their learning process, and I'm always amazed that it's such a hard sell to some educators on its importance. But if you follow some of these steps, then you'll be able to provide the needed information to market the program to your stakeholders. Use the California Food Policy Advocates website. They have all the data you need to support these programs and get the buy-in from the local administration. Provide a plan that is needed and required for most, if not all, of grant applications. It will help you write that grant application that could give you an edge over another district's grant application, and give you the direction needed knowing what exactly you will need before taking on this challenge. So planning is the key, and it's important to take the time needed to allow for training, for practice runs, and for troubleshooting. So no event ever goes as planned, but good planning and preparation will help you handle those unexpected things a little better. And hopefully these tools will help you navigate that process. One of the first things you want to do is put together a pre-implementation checklist. And we use a checklist that LAUSD published a while back. It's incredibly detailed. It's more than my district needs, but we were able to pull out of it what we needed. And in that, it was helpful for us to make sure that we covered all of our bases and kept on time. So one of the first things you want to do is really designate a breakfast team, a group of people who are supportive of this program that can help you go out and market that program and get all the different areas you need on board in order to make this work seamlessly. So what we did in my district was set a meeting with our key nutrition department staff, and we developed the initial plan ourselves. We then designated those that would be affected by the program, the teachers, custodians, security, classroom aides, office staff, administration, and prepared ourselves for all the questions and the roadblocks and the no's that we felt that would be thrown our way. We then scheduled meetings with the principal and with the site as well, and together presented to the school staff for conversation and questions. The sites we started the program in were the sites we were most prepared for and able to address all the issues in advance of the program beginning. So the best thing you can do is find that champion. I spent a lot of time talking to principals and teachers about wellness and healthy eating. The people who are actually listening to you are the ones who will support the program. So do your research and have all that information, because you never know what conversation is going to turn into, I really want that after the bell program. One of the most important things is going to be your menu. It's going to really drive the program, and it can make or break the process with the teachers. So you want to make sure you offer a variety of items that students like, that are easy to eat in the classroom, that are not too messy, and ones that students can serve and open themselves. If the packaging is too difficult to open, you will lose your teachers quickly. The last thing they want to do is spend time opening packaging because there are other things they're trying to do while the students are eating. This here is an example of our breakfast menu, and for breakfast in the classroom we only have 2 entree choices, one hot, one cold each day, and the manager chooses from our regular school breakfast menu which hot and which cold item they're going to serve in the classroom. We offer 2 servings of fruit, and we also offer 2 kinds of milk. One of our fruit offerings is a dried fruit every day to give the students a little option and to make it a little easier on the teachers. Make sure your entrees do not require any kind of condiments, syrup, ketchup, whatever. It's hard for them to open, and the teacher has to spend time opening the packaging, and it's also very messy. So we eliminated all condiments at breakfast, and if we serve anything that would require maple syrup, like pancakes or waffles, we just make sure we use an item that has it all baked in. So once you get your menu done, you want to get your pre-implementation checklist narrowed down a little bit. You'll need to determine the best way to deliver the meals to the classroom. So you want to know, is school staff going to deliver it? Are you going to have students deliver it? Will site administration or teachers be part of that process? Regardless, it's very important that you walk the campus yourself to each building and to each classroom to ensure the route is clear and without any roadblocks or distractions. Whatever you choose, it is important to ensure the path is clear for both staff and students. You don't want any roadblocks in the way that could cause them to spill something or to trip and hurt themselves. And if students are picking up the meals, you want to make sure there's nothing between the cafeteria and the classroom that's going to distract them from their duty of getting meals to the classroom. We did have a couple students go right by the playground and decided to park the meals and play on the playground instead of taking food to the classroom. So little things like that do happen that you have to be prepared for. We have 2 sites that have 2-story buildings, and so my staff delivers all the second floor meals to that second floor landing, and then the students come out and pick up the meals and take them to the classroom. So you also are going to have to identify and purchase equipment, and this is where you really need to be detailed in those grant applications to ensure you get all the money you need to buy the equipment that you're going to need. Each site will need its own equipment list of needed additional items. So we used an equipment guide from the lunchbox.com. It's a nice little guide that we use to determine exactly what pieces of equipment we were going to need, all the way from extra refrigeration down to the little wagons and the rollers and the refrigerator bags that we use for the meals that go to the classroom. You want to ask for the moon, because you don't want to be, like Tara said, ask for $2,000 for a refrigerator when indeed the refrigerator costs $1,500 or $2,500. So you want to try and make sure that you account for every expense so that you can obtain that grant money. Do you need additional refrigerator space? If so, does the site, again, have power? That is so important to make sure that you are able to utilize that new equipment. The transport equipment also takes a lot of space. Depending on your menu, you may have 2 to 4 bags per classroom, and your staff will have to clean and refill these daily, so take that into consideration. You're going to need an area big enough to store those bags for the next day and over the weekend, because many of your multipurpose rooms are used for other events on the weekend, and you don't want to keep them lined up in the multipurpose room. No matter how many trash cans you have now, you're going to need a lot more for breakfast in the classroom or any after the bell breakfast program. It does create more trash, of course, and you want to make sure you get all of that food out of the classroom. So your custodians will be very happy with you if you provide enough trash cans that they can put in strategic areas around the classrooms to get rid of that trash quickly. I use grants to purchase all of my grab-and-go equipment for my high schools. At the time, I had 8 high schools, and we provided a grab-and-go meal that had all the required components, and the students would grab a bag, grab their choice of milk, scan their card, and be off to class. We utilized our grant funds to pay for 8 Cambro serving carts, and I also purchased 4 iPads and 4 orbital scanners so that the students could just come through, scan their card, and be off in I think transaction time was 3.5 seconds. And we also use the grant funds for marketing materials to promote the cards, as well as signage and training of our staff. In addition to the new equipment, you'll need items like wet naps to clean hands before the meal, and again after if you're doing a breakfast in the classroom, paper towels for spills, wet wipes to clean the desk, and placemats if you like, little things that you should consider. We provide at least 2 wet naps, one for the students to wipe their hands and one for the students to wipe the desk when they're done. So the next step is to develop your timeline. Your menu, of course, we said drives everything. So you want to start with taste tests and see how they work in a classroom setting. Go to classrooms, provide some options, and get both the student and the teacher feedback before you design your menu. Once you have that menu done, you can determine what equipment you will need. This is where utilizing grants will also be helpful. Next to labor, this will be your greatest expense. This will also take the most time, so plan for setbacks. I don't care how many times a vendor tells me what their lead time is, it's always at least twice as long as they say. Training will also take some time, so you'll need to work with other departments to ensure everyone has the training they need and the time to be trained. I spent time with lead custodians in each site telling them what our plans were, listening to their concerns and ideas for quick and easy trash removal, and then we followed through on what they needed, and they've been our biggest supporters and our most loyal fans of the program ever since. If you promise them something, follow through, because they will be supportive. Work with each site to develop the delivery timeline. It's so important to ensure that you have everything timed out so as not to encroach on instructional minutes. In the beginning, it will take longer than normal as everyone gets used to their roles and adjusts for efficiency as you go. It took us a good 2 weeks to get into our groove. So there's a lot of little hiccups, a lot of little adjustments. You just fix them as they pop up. You'll need to revisit the timeline too. Each time there's a lengthy break. Reinforcement's key, and teachers forget, students forget, even your staff forgets. So it's important to revisit all of that on a regular basis. Promotion and marketing is also very important. You want to promote the program. Promote for several weeks up to the start point. Promote during that first week, and then go back and re-promote throughout the year, because things start off great and they start to trickle off, and parents forget and get busy, and teachers, don't order as many meals sometimes, or like we had one site that stopped ordering breakfast altogether, and the reason was the teacher didn't like the chocolate milk. Great, so we just changed it from a 1% white to a non-fat chocolate to a non-fat white milk. So we had the two options in there. Make sure everyone knows about the program, and make sure you set a reminder at various times just to send something home via email. You can do a robocall home, and check in with each site too, just to make sure that everything's okay and you're addressing any issues as they come, because that can be the worst promotion of your program at all, is not following up on items that could be detrimental to the program. So grants and how to use them. Starting a new program is expensive, and grants are really important to get all of that startup cost out of the way for you. I've started after the Bell Breakfast programs and expanded after the Bell Breakfast programs, and I've used grants to fund most of the high-cost items for both. I purchased additional refrigeration units to store additional product needed that would have cost my budget about $25,000 at the time. And that was for a district with an ADP of 4,000 meals, and we were 40% free and reduced. So that was money that my budget didn't have, and grants saved me. And we were able to do a breakfast in the program, a breakfast in the classroom program in every single one of our elementary sites at that time. As I mentioned earlier, I wrote 3 different grants for equipment I needed at my high school grab and go programs. And with high school students, you have to be in the middle of their traffic pattern. They won't take the extra step to get food if it means 1 second less time with their friends. So I utilized breakfast expansion grants to purchase Cambro carts that were mobile and that we could move into the right areas and move if the traffic flow patterns moved. So we put them in strategic places where the most traffic of students would roam, so that we could get the highest participation possible. I also purchased iPads and needed to beef up my Wi-Fi, and I was at a school board meeting doing like a State of the Nutrition address to the board, and there was a gentleman in the audience who pulled me aside afterwards and asked how he could help. And I took him out to one of my programs and showed him what we were doing, and he wrote us a check and paid for the 4 iPads, the 4 orbital scanners, and the Wi-Fi boost that we needed in order to speed up the program. We also went to our local hospital foundation board and presented to them some issues that we were having, because my first grant I wrote, I didn't write it for enough money. So there were a lot of things that I needed more money for, and showed them what we were doing, and I asked if they would fund the bags that we were putting the product in. They funded every single bag, and all they asked in return was to have their logo on the bag, which we did, which was very easy to do. So it's important that you go out and seek out all of the money that's out there. The state offers a great program of grants that you can participate in. Tap into your local resources, into your community, and find prominent community members. I was surprised to find a few here that all they needed was to be asked, and they're willing to help. And it's not only changing when breakfast is served, but it's how breakfast is served that really makes a difference. And Tara talked about being innovative, and that could be the deciding factor between whether you get the grant or don't get the grant. sell the program, and the best you can market into that grant, that's how you're going to market it to your site and to your site administrators too. So be innovative, find a way, and utilize all that grant money. I think that's all I have. I do have my information on the slide. Tia also has it. And I welcome phone calls and email. My email's a little crazy. I don't always get back to people right away, but I will eventually. And I'm always happy to help or provide you somebody else who might have the better expertise than I do to help.
Okay, Stephanie, thank you so much. That was, as usual, just a great presentation, so much information, and so helpful to hear. And also, thank you generally for being a champion for kids and for school breakfast. We appreciate the fact that there are folks like you out there doing this good work and this hard work. So in the last 10 minutes or so that we have together, I did want to give folks an opportunity to ask questions. We've already had some come in, so I'm going to go ahead and open up these questions. If the first one, I think we'll send to Tara. Somebody is asking, can you clarify what you mean by a net cash resource?
That's money that you have in excess to, well, you're supposed to have no more than 3 months total operating expenses in your cafeteria fund. So if you have more than 3 months worth, that would be considered excess net cash resources.
Okay, thank you for that. And then Stephanie, somebody is asking if you have a website or resource that you use to get ideas for identifying and purchasing equipment.
Yeah, the lunchbox.com is a really good resource. They have an equipment list on there and also different items that you can serve in varying ways in a classroom environment. I can't think of the name of the vendor offhand that does the bags for us, but if I get that, I'll get that to you, Tia, and maybe you can email it out to the participants.
Certainly. And I believe, Stephanie, you sent me both the LAUSD pre-implementation checklist and some materials from the lunchbox.com. So we'll make sure that those particular materials also go out in a follow-up email to everyone who registered today. Okay. And then, Tara, another question for you. Somebody's saying, our small district is severe need if you look across the entirety of the district, but not necessarily each site individually. So will those folks still get points for being considered severe need?
At the site level, yes, they will. So we only give the 15 points out at the site level. So if one site doesn't reach that, then they wouldn't get the extra 15 points.
Okay, so that severe need criteria has to be done at the site level, not at the district level.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. And then, Tara, I think another one for you. Someone is writing to say that they have a school that serves 18 to 24-year-olds, and but their school is categorized as a K through 12 school. So can they still apply for a breakfast grant?
It depends. So if the 18 to 24-year-olds are there in an attempt to get a degree, then yes, but I think that would be kind of something I would want to talk to this person about, just to clarify why they're there, and yeah. Okay, so I'll make sure that the person who asked that question, that we connect them directly with you, Tara. That sounds good. Yeah, it's a little more complicated. Yeah.
Okay. All right, another question. Somebody is asking, we've already started Second Chance at a secondary school, and they want to expand by taking carts out and using wireless tablets. So can they apply for the grants to purchase those items, even if they've already started the Second Chance program?
Oh, absolutely, yes. So the grants are for expanding the Second Chance breakfast as well.
Okay, so you can either be starting or expanding an After the Bell program, and then for that existing pool of $1 million, you can even be starting or expanding a non-breakfast After the Bell program, just breakfast in general.
Exactly.
Okay, Great. Let's see, just sorry, we're getting lots of questions in.
That's good.
Which is great. So somebody is asking, does a preschool count as part of our, does a preschool that's part of our district count as a site?
Probably.
Okay.
Yeah, that's another one I would want to speak to this person, but very likely, yes.
Okay. So that's one of those sort of questions that you might need to get into a bit more detail with them. Okay. Case by case. So folks, if you are on the line and you heard that Tara wants to contact you directly, feel free to reach out to her. But as well, I will also make sure to pass on your contact information so that she knows who's actually submitting these questions today through the webinar. And then someone's asking, can we use the grant to replace broken equipment?
Yes, but that's not really the intent of the grant. But if you can make a case, use that narrative section to make a case for that. But generally, more points are given if you're purchasing equipment that's going to expand the program. And we don't really consider replacing equipment to meet that. But if you can use that narrative section to, make a good argument as to how it will expand the program, then that will likely help you.
Okay. So this seems to go back to the point you made earlier about if you want to do second chance and you want a new oven, perhaps at first glance one doesn't seem to necessarily follow the other, but if you can make the argument that second chance will give you increased participation and so you're going to need more capacity from your ovens, that a newer, bigger, better oven might actually be a really reasonable purchase to make. Is that?
That's exactly what I mean.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Let's see if there's another question out there. Somebody's asking, and this is probably a really good clarification to make, is the grant for an entire district, or do we need to apply for each one of the school sites to participate?
So you'll need to, it's one grant application for the district, but a part of that is submitting a site application for each site. So you do need to apply for each site.
Okay.
But it's all part of the overall grant application.
So two parts of the application, one for the overall LEA, one for each specific site. And then, Tara, can you remind us how many sites each district can include in the grant application?
Up to 10 sites.
Up to 10. Okay. Okay, great. So we do have just a couple more minutes, and I think we have a couple more questions that we haven't answered, so let's try to squeeze these in. I'm just scrolling through. Someone's asking that they are a non-public school serving a very low-income population, and it looks like they are serving reimbursable meals. At least they're getting state funding for the meals served. So are they eligible for the grants?
Non-public schools are not eligible for the grants, unfortunately.
Okay, so you do need to be a public school. Okay, thank you for that. And I saw one more question pop in. Give me just 1 second to try to track it down. This actually looks like maybe an iteration of the question we got earlier, which is there's a school that already has an After the Bell program. They're looking for more equipment and then additional marketing to presumably to expand the program or to make it more robust. And so I believe the answer is yes, that's fine for them to apply. Is that correct, Tara?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Okay, great. Well, we are at 2:59, and I do want to make sure that I have time to say thank you to everyone who joined us today in the audience. Thank you for your great questions, and an extra big thank you to both Stephanie and Tara for taking the time out of their day to provide some great information here, and then going above and beyond and being willing to be a resource and a point of contact even after today's event. We really do appreciate all the work that all of you are doing to better serve kids in California. And please do reach out if you have any questions you are welcome to contact me. If I can't answer your question, I'll make sure that I pass you on to Tara or to Stephanie or somebody who can get you the information you need. If you submitted a question today and we were not able to get to it, we will follow up by email. And in fact, if you can be patient and give us a few days, we will likely be able to turn all the questions that came in today into a frequently asked question document and get that out to everyone who registered for the webinar today. Again, the webinar recording and the slide presentation, as well as the materials that Stephanie mentioned, will be available online, and we'll send you a notification just as soon as those things are ready and live linked on our website. So with that, I'm going to say I hope everyone learned something interesting today. I know that I did. Thank you again for joining us, and I hope everyone has a great afternoon. Thanks so much.